Welcome guys, welcome to this video. In this video we are going to create an employee manager app using React and Laravel. Now we are going to see the concept of the basics of React. We will see how to create components, how to pass values using props. We are going to see Laravel, and we are going to understand the basics and the usage of Laravel, how we can create routes, control our models, as well as we will see how to create a route model binding and concepts like that. So we have this application here where we use the Laravel factory to generate the data. We will do that too. We can view the data in this one. We can update the data as well as we can delete the data. So when we do any of these operations, we get nice notification up there. We can add here the employee details. We also have the debug bar at the bottom. We will see the usage of debug bar with so that it is going to be helpful when you develop your application. Alright guys, to start with we need to create a Laravel project. So I'm here in the Laravel website, and here are the instructions to install or create a Laravel project. Now here we need to use Composer, so make sure you have Composer installed in your system. So here we have Windows exe you can download from here. If you have Mac, you can run these commands to install Composer. Make sure you have the PHP installed in your system. If you're using Windows, you can simply download XAMPP, and basically when you, for example, if I not here, if I click here, so you can see here we have the 8.1.1, and what it includes PHP 8.1.1. so this is going to install the PHP in your system. Then you can run Composer, and then you can create a Laravel project. If you have Mac, in that case and you don't have PHP installed, you can follow the tutorial from the description. The link is given there. So now, first thing first, I want to create a project. I'm going to copy this command and I'm going to open the PowerShell. So here I will navigate to the desktop. So desktop, and here I need to create a folder. So I'm not going to create a separate folder here because this command is going to do it for us. So I'm just going to paste the command, and instead of example app, we can say here employee app, and it is going to create a project for us. We're going to put all the files, all the required files in there. So you can I already have the folder created here, so we need to wait till it completes all the dependencies it is installing currently. Alright, so the project is installed here. So if we follow the instructions, it says go inside it using change directory cd, and then we need to run php audit and serve. So let's do that. So we are going to go inside the folder using cd, and our project name is employee app. So we are inside it. So I clear the screen here, and then php artisan serve. Alright, so development server is up, and I need to copy this link, and I'm going to paste it right here, and you can see our application is up. Now I have XAMPP installed in my system currently, and it is up and running. So if I go to localhost /php myadmin, so I can reach to the php myadmin. Here we are going to create employee app database. So I'm gonna, or employee underscore app, to create that. So we have this database now. What we need to do, we need to connect our application with this database. So for that, what I first need to do is I need to open this folder in a text editor. So I'm going to use the Visual Studio in this case I have, and I'm going to drag and drop the project here. Okay, so we have .env file. Now this env file, first thing first, you can set up the project name, the app name. So we have app as employee manager, and then to to debugging needs to be true. It will help us in debugging the app. If your app is in production live on live server, you can put it production here, otherwise it is going to be local. Now we have database connection. So here it says Laravel. Now we created the database with the name of employee_app, so we need to change it here. So we need to put that name here. Now if you have different username and password, you need to change that here too. Other than that, other configurations we don't need to touch so far. So we have here AWS configuration for S3 bucket and Redis and other, but those things are a bit advanced, so we're not going to touch those things currently. So I'm going to close this file. Now if we go back here, our application is right there. What is happening, basically this page is powered by welcome.blade. So if I go here and resources, you will see a folder named views. Now views are responsible for the display of your application, and any thing that you see here that's going to be generated by view. So here we have a view file, welcome.blade.php. If I open this file, this is the file which is showing all the content that we are seeing in the main page here. Now because when we go to this URL, it is the root of our application, and for that we have some routes set. So if there is a folder named routes, you can check there. We have web.php. We also have api.php, but we are not going to deal with this. It is for the API development. We will be working with web.php. So if I open this file, we have a route created here. Route, if user goes to the main URL of our application, and we are returning welcome. Now this welcome is the welcome.blade, so the name must match here. So here it's a welcome.blade, we are just passing welcome, so it's working there. So we can change that. Now we also have, if you go here, app, inside there we have HTTP, and there we have controllers. Now we will be adding controllers here, and those controllers will help us now working with the data. And also, if you have noticed, we also have models here. So if we need to talk to the database, we will be using the models. By default, we have a user model created here. Alright, so I'm going to close these directories for now. Now first thing first, what we need to do, we need to work with the React setup on our Laravel application, because by default, if I go to resources and then JS, and we have app.js here. If I open this, so currently it is importing the bootstrap file, which is in the same directory. And if I go in that file, we don't see anything related to React. So we need to set up all by ourselves. We do have Axios provided by default, so we don't need to install Axios. Now in the video further, we will see what Axios exactly do. So let's install the React. So first thing first, I go back to the PowerShell. Here we need to open the new tab, and here I'm gonna go back to the project. So it's gonna be desktop, and there cd employee app. Now here we need to run a command. It is basically we used to run a command if you were working with Laravel 7 or before. We used to run PHP audits and preset React. So if I run this command, you will get alright. Now one thing I must tell you, if we go back to the environment file .env, we can't provide this space in between. So if we are creating any app, it must have without space. So here I remove the space and run this command again. Now you can see that command preset is not defined, because after Laravel 7 this is not going to work. So we need to use a different approach to install React in our application. So for that, what we need to do, we need to run these commands. So first, composer preset, let me copy and paste the command here. So composer require Laravel UI. Now this is going to install the required components, and after that we can run the React command. Okay, it is done. So now we run PHP artisan UI React. So when I run this, it is telling us please run npm install and npm run dev. So I'm gonna install npm install first, and it is going to install a few required packages. And if I go back here to our application in resources.js, you will see that we now have a components folder. There is an example.js file. If I open this file, you will see we have React imported here, and this is a React component. So we are getting the React configured. So currently, let's see, we need to wait till it completes. Alright, so it is complete now. So we can run npm run dev as well to compile. So if I run this, it is suggesting us to run this command as well. So just going to copy and run this command. Now I can run npm run dev. And now it is compiling, so you can see that compiled successfully. So we have a compilation working, and that's good. So our React is now configured. Now we need to bind it with the HTML so that we can see how it works. So currently, if I go to our app and refresh, we don't see any difference because we are not calling any React component anywhere. So we need to work with that. And before that, what I'm going to do, I want to also set the auth pages for our application. So I'm going to run a command here. That is in UI auth. So it is going to create the scaffolding for the auth pages. So if I go now back to the application and refresh, you will see the login and register pages are created. So if I go to register, we can register a user. Now in the project, if you see, by running that scaffolding command, the PHP artisan auth, we got few views files here. We got auth folder where we have login, register, and that's why we see this page now there, because these files are added. And also we have a layout folder. So it is basically a layout file where we are using all the CSS and JS. And basically, if I go back to app, this page is having the layout file used in it. So we will be seeing it how we're gonna work with this. Now I also want to install a package which is the Laravel debug bar. So what that exactly does, it tells us and helps us in debugging the application. So if we face an issue, we can debug using Laravel debug bar. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back in PowerShell. So the command is composer require Laravel debug bar. The link for the package is in the description. So I'm gonna run this command now. Alright, it is completed. Now I'm gonna go back to app. So if I refresh now, and if you notice at the bottom, we get a debug bar now. So to have this enabled, make sure you have the app debug set to true. If it is false, it's not going to display the debug bar at the bottom. So now what the benefit of this is that we can see what exactly the view file used for this page. So if I'm in the register and if I go here views, you can see it tells us this is powered by a register.blade, also powered by a layout app.blade. So if I go back to home, it tells us this is powered by welcome.blade. So if I go to login, it is going to tell us, yeah, it is powered by login and app. So if you face any issue on this page, you know which files you will have to check. You can check here. You can also check here routes. So what routes are responsible here, we can see that there is a login controller and there is a method that is dealing with this. So by adding the login pages, we also got controllers. So if I go to app HTTP controllers, there is an auth folder now, and inside auth we have few controller created. Those controllers are basically dealing with login, registration, those components. All right, so enough talking. Now let's get started. First, I want to have the database set up here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to run the command. Let's say clear that PHP artisan migrate. Now this is going to run all the migrations, and it is going to create the database tables for us because we have a few migrations file here in our project database migrations. And you can see here we have create user table. This is provided by Laravel, so when you generate a new project you will have these here. So now what we're going to do, we're going to run the migrate, and you can see that it migrated. So these tables are now created. So if I refresh, we can see that we have users table, so we can register and log in using this table. So let's do that. So if I go here, click on register, I'm gonna say, let's say test, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, register. We just got registered. So if I go to home page, it's this, and here dashboard, you are logged in. So for viewing this page, we need to log in. Now let's do this. What we do on this page, we need to display the React component. Currently we don't, we are not doing it, so let's do that. So what I do basically, I close this folder, we go here, so our JS resources, JS, then we have component example. So here we have some content. So it says example component, I'm example component. It is getting generated here in React, and here export default. And at the bottom, if you notice, you will see document.getElement by ID. So it is looking for an ID example, and then it is rendering this example component to that ID. So if you see here, basically it's a function, and that is export default here, and then here it is used, and then it is bound with this ID. Alright, so if I go to app.blade, we have an ID of app here, you can see. So what we can do, we can change this there, so we can pass this instead to see the difference. So what I do, I'm gonna pass the app ID here, so just gonna make it app, and if this ID exists, bind this example to that. So it's gonna bind it there. So if in app.blade we have this app ID, so it should work. Now to see the changes, what we need to do, either we run npm run dev, or we can run npm run watch. The main difference is if you run npm run dev, so if you make any changes in any JS or React file, you will have to run npm run dev all by yourself manually. If you do npm run watch, it is going to watch for changes inside the React files, and it is going to compile automatically. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say npm run watch, so it does it automatically. So it says mix not recognized. We need to run npm install one more time. And I'm going to run one more command here, npm install Laravel mix latest version. So let's install this. Now we try again npm run watch. So you can see now it's working. Yeah, now it is compiled automatically. So what we do here, now refresh the page. Now you'll notice we have example component, I'm example component. So if I go back here in example, and here I say React, and here I'm a React component, and then I refresh here, you can see it changes there. Now the navigation from the top is completely gone. The reason is because in the app.blade, it is the main ID that we binded our component to. So navigation is inside it, you can see here. So we need to correct this. So for that, what we can do, basically we need to create a file, and there we can call this component. Alright, so let's correct this, bring our navigation back. So what I do simply, I'm not gonna change ID here. We'll go back to example.js and it's gonna change the code back to the way it was. Alright, and we're gonna leave this code for now so that whenever we create a new component, we can get the code from here if you want to. So what we need to do, first thing first, if I go back here, we have a home.blade, and if I go here, refresh, you can see this came back. So we want our React component showing up right here, right? So for that, we need to find out where this is outputting. So you are logged in. So this is outputting from home.blade file. So if I see here, you can see you are logged in, and session status, that is happening right here. So we can bind our component to this very file. So here, if I pass here, let's say ID, and here I'm gonna call it employee app. So this is the ID. Now if I go back here, instead of example, we pass employee app, and go back here, refresh. You can see that now it is showing here we have our navigation also working. And this changes we are updating because behind this is automatically recompiling the npm run watch. So if it is not working in your system, it is not going to change here. So check there if you face any issue. Alright, so now what we need to do basically, we need to, because if you see here we are working with example.js component, and we want to create multiple components for our Crud of this employee manager. So for creating multiple components, we need to make a setup for React. So if I go back here in resources.js, in the JS folder, we need to create another file. I'm going to call this file index.js. And basically what this file needs to do, we need to cut this portion of the code where we are binding our app to the ID, and we're going to pass this in the let me bring it here, so the index.js, this file. So the main reason of doing this is because we want to bind multiple components, not just a single component. So what I do basically here, I'm going to create another component. Next to example.js, it's going to be app.js. Alright, so now we have an app.js component, and I'm going to call this component inside this component. So let's do that. So if I go to example.js, we can copy these 2 lines from here, go back to index.js and paste there. Alright, and now to call this app.js, we need to say import app. Now if something is becoming confusing and hard to understand, bear with me. I'm gonna explain how things are working. So initially it might be a bit confusing. So here we say import app from, and then here we tell the path. So here it's going to be the components, and then there is the app component that we are calling, and that's how we include it. And instead of example, I'm going to pass this app. So here basically we just called a single component, and we bind that component with the ID employee app, and that employee app is in the home.blade that we used. So this is done. Now what we need to do in app.js. So app.js basically going to be, let me copy this. Alright, and here we need to create a function. So that function is going to be, I'm just going to copy this again just to save time, and paste here. And I'm going to call this function as app, and export default because we are exporting this, so we call it app. Alright, now here what we need to do, we need to say we don't need this, so we can remove this, and here at this point we can call component here, so we can say our component goes here. So in simple words, if you want to include some components, you can call those components right here. So you need to include it on top, and you need to include a component here. So we need to have a component. So let's do this. So if I go to Google, Bootstrap, and here we need to look for tables. So I want to include a table, and that is we will be showing the employee list. So we want to include this table, right? So yeah, so we want to create a component that holds the data for this table. So let's do that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a component, and for a component we can create a separate directory. So here I create a folder, and I call this employee, let's call it for now list. Alright, and inside this I create a component called table.js. Now this table.js is something we need to include here so that we can bind it. So so we can display it. So it's import, call it table from, and then employee list, and then table. Currently there is nothing. I say hello. Now here we need to call it as well. So to call a component, you simply say table, and this is how you call the component. So it is now going to render here. So you get that. We have index where we are calling this. We have app where we are passing this, and this app is called here. Now there is one thing that is missing. I created this index.js, but how our application gonna know that we need to use this file? The reason is because this is something we created. So if I go to app.js, and this is outside of the components directory, this is lowercase app.js by default, it was present there. So if you see here, we have require components and example given here. Here, what we can do, we can simply say here index. So here what we are saying, okay, there is a bootstrap.js included, we are including it. There is index.js and use it. So we are calling it, and then it is connected to our Laravel app. So we go index.js here, we are telling, okay, we have an ID of app. We need to render our components there. And here is a component. That component will have all the components inside it. So we are passing that component. And here, if I go to this component, you can see here, we call the component inside it. So if you want to call another component, you just need to create another component, pass like this here. For now, we have only one, so we will be doing it like this. So if I go back to the here, refresh, and inspect console, here we can see the errors. So if we face any issues, so let's see, the hello is undefined. We need to remove hello from here because it's a component, so it should be something like this in the GSX format. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this from example. I'm going to go in table. I'm going to call it table, and this example also becomes table. Yeah, alright, and then you're going to refresh. Now you can see that this is rendering their table component. So now we can basically work with the table component and show our table here. So if I go back to Bootstrap website, so here is the table HTML. So I copy this, and here we don't need this, we want table. So let's paste table here. Now I don't know why they are not giving the table, instead they are giving And the another thing, we need to change the class to class name, as in JSX you pass class name, so I just pass that here instead of class. Alright, now if I go back here and inspect, so we have a table here. I'm just gonna add it as HTML, and I Control A key and Control C to copy, so that we can have that content there. So I'm going to go back and we can replace it here. I'm going to indent it a bit so it looks acceptable. Class name needs to change back to change to be class name. So now we should have it's working. So let's Alright, let's see what happens. Go back there, refresh. Now we have table showing up right there. So we have Bootstrap by default working there, so it's alright. We have here invalid down property called span. So we basically don't need these values. So we can simply get rid of these values here. Alright, so we have a single data. The rest of the data we will be putting here using factory. So let's do that. Now it's the time we work with the content of our table. So we need to show the employee names and everything here. So what we do, basically we give us here, and here I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to put here, I'm going to give it a width like this. Then we need here a name field, and at last we want to have a field of actions. So these are going to be the buttons where we want to show the content, basically edit, delete, update buttons. So that's going to be here. So now the next thing is we need to work with the data. So we don't currently have any data, and we are using a function here. So I'm going to change the structure of this file, and I'm going to show you how we can do this. So I'm going to minimize it a bit. Okay, so we have function. I'm going to minimize it. Here I'm going to say class. I'm going to call it table class, and it's going to extend, and it is going to extend the component, a React component. And the reason I'm doing this, here we have a single function that is working, and in class we can have multiple functions. So for fetching the data from the database, we need to have a function which is going to be a separate function from this one. So we need a class in that case. So what I'm going to do to deal with this very code, I'm going to call a function here. It's going to be a render function, and inside this render function you can pass your JSX. So all this that we passed here, I'm just going to cut this. So you just remove this example function, and inside render you paste it like this. So this is exactly the same thing. Now here this class has name table, and at the export we want the same name. So if I go back here and refresh, we get an error, component is not defined. Now I call this component here, but we need to import it from React. So we need to say here comma, and here we say component. So this should fix that error. So go back here, refresh. You can see we got the data back and no error. So now it is working through our class. Alright, now let's work with the function that is going to get us the data. So for that we can say here, we can add a comment, get employee list. So this is going to be a function, and this function is going to be in getting the data. So I create a function here, get employee list, and I'm going to use the arrow function. Alright, and I'm also in a class you can use constructor. So to set up the default variables, you can use constructor. So it's going to be constructor, and if there is any props, we have the access to it, so we can use these props. But we don't have props currently. Yeah, in React we use state. So any variable you will be, or property variable is also called property. So you can update using state. So here we're going to be this dot state equals an object which is going to have the variables. And if it is getting confusing when you see these working, you will get the understanding how this works basically. So here I create a variable employee, and it is going to be empty array by default. And here we need to pass colon instead. So because it is inside object. When you are inside object, you don't use is equal to sign, you use colon. Alright, now this employees, we're going to put data inside it and loop through that data and display it here. But before that, we need to work with the Laravel side first. From our component, we are ready to show the data here, but if we go in our database, we don't have any employee table or employee data. So let's deal with that. So for that, I go to the terminal again, and here we have PHP Artisan serve already running and npm run watch. So I need to open another tab, and here what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the directory first, and then employee app, and here inside we need to create a model, a factory, a seeder file. So I'm going to show you the command for it. So it's a PHP Artisan make, and we can create a model. So model, because we want to deal with the database, and in database we will be creating a table with the name of employees. So here we will use the singular name of that to create a model. So it's going to have a migration, factory, and seeder, and this is how you can pass this to create these three files along with model. So if I hit enter, you can see model created successfully, factory created successfully, we have a migration file created successfully, and a seeder file created successfully. So if I go back to text editor, here we need to go to the database, migrations, and you will see new file, create employees table. So here in employees table, we need to add the fields we need. So here first field we need is table, and that is going to be the name field, so employee name. So I'm going to call that string, and it is going to be let's call it employee underscore name. Alright, and also we need salary for each employee. So I said $table salary. Oh, sorry. So when you do this, we need to pass here integer and pass salary inside it. Okay, so these are the two fields we need. So if I run now PHP Artisan migrate, we have this table there in the database. So you can see employees. Right, so we can now store data here. So now we need to work with the factory. So in Laravel factory help us create demo data. So in this case I want to create some demo data so that we can display here in our React app. So let's do that. So what I do, I close the migration file, go into factories, and there is employee factory. Here we have a definition folder. Inside it we need to pass two fields, and those two fields are exactly the same, employee name and salary. So let's do that. So because we need to generate data for these two fields, employee underscore name, and what we want to pass here, it's going to be, I will show you in a moment, and also salary. Okay, so if I go here it's extending factory class. So the factory class has a faker library in it. So if you want to generate some dummy data, you can call to this class. As it is extending factory class, it will have access to faker. So to access that, you can say this, and then you can say faker, because we are calling this class using factory. We have access to faker, and in faker, if you want to generate name, you just call name. So it is going to generate random names. Now we need to generate salary as well. So for that, I need to generate numbers. So for that, I do here $this, and then faker, and I can say generate number between. So it's a number between, let's say 50,000 to 500,000. All right, so the number going to be between these two numbers, and this is going to be random. So this is how you define like what type of data you generate, but this is not done yet because we need to tell Laravel that, okay, we need how many records we need to create. So for that, we need to go into the seeder file. So if you remember in the command, we also created a seeder file. So let's check that now. So if I go to seeder, we have here employee seeder, and here inside this employee seeder we have run method where we need to run. So we say here employee. So we are calling employee class, and then we are saying factory. Now why and how I'm doing this? Employee is the model that we created, and you can see that we used the create model, and it created the model. And this model, if you want to access it, is inside here app models and then employee. All right, so we are calling this model inside seeder, and as this employee model has access to factory, so we can tell here how many records we want to create. So I want to generate 100 employees, and I tell, all right, we need to create these records. So just create these. So Laravel will know, okay, using factory, we need to create 100 records. It will go inside factory. There it will see, okay, these are the fields, and this is the type of data we need to generate. So it will generate it. Now here we need to call, include the employee. So here I would say use app backslash. So if you remember, we had an app model employee. So the same thing here, models, and then employee. If you are not going to include this, you will face error that employee not found. This is done. Now, when we run a command, a seed command, it's going to pass the data into database. But in the database, when we go, there is a restriction. We can't pass mass assignment, mass data in database directly. We need to tell database that expect that we are passing some data. So be ready. So for that we say here protected, and we say here $fillable, and we say we are going to pass some data and allow this data to get in. So for a mass assignment, this is important, otherwise you're gonna face error. So here simply we need to pass the field names, employee name, and also we need to, there shouldn't be any spaces, then salary. Alright, so from model side we are all set. This is all we need. Employee seeder, we have it here. Employee factory, we have it here. All looks fine to me. Now the only thing is pending that if I go back here and file, in the seeder file we said okay, generate 100 create, but to run this employee seeder, because we created this seeder file, we need to connect it with Laravel seeder, because we have a seeders directory. There is a database seeder, and here we need to include all the seeders files we want to run, because if you can see we created the seeder, So we need to tell Laravel, okay, we created one Cedar file, run it. So to run it, we need to call it here. So here, what we want to do, we simply want to say $this, and we say call, and call what? We want to call the employee Cedar. So employee Cedar class. All right, and it is going to run the employee Cedar, and then employee Cedar will run the factory, and in the factory we will get the data generated. Okay, let's see how it works. I run the command here, php artisan migrate -- seed. Now, nothing to migrate. There's nothing, no new table we were adding, so there's nothing to migrate. For seeding, you can see that it ran employee Cedar. It took 180 milliseconds. Now, if I go to the database and check the employees, and you can see that we have 100 records here. So we have random names generated. We have random numbers generated between 50,000 and 500,000. So that is the salary. So yeah, we now have the dummy data. Now, as we have the data now, we can display this data to our app here. So if you remember, we started that in table.js. So we created the function, but we stopped because we didn't have the data. So let's proceed here. Here, what we need to do, first thing first, I'm going to call Axios. Now, Axios is the HTTP client that helps you get the data from get and post requests you can use to get the data. So here I say get, and I just need to pass a URL. So I say here get employee. So this is the route we are passing. So we are expecting data here, and once we get the data, we have then, and here we want to do I'm going to call function, which is going to receive a response. And that response we can work with. All right, so we need to see what response we are getting. So I simply say here console.log response, so we can see that what type of data we are getting. And now the thing is, we need to call this function. And when you want to call this function, you need to call it when this component is mounted. So for there is a method present in React, and that is a lifecycle method. And what exactly it will do once the component is mounted, it is going to call the function. So we say here component did mount. All right, and this is the method. All we need to do this dot, we're gonna call get employee list. That's it. So when we refresh the page, the component will mount. Once it mounts, it calls this function. This function goes to this URL, and currently we don't have this URL, so we need to set this. And once we have set up, we will see the console log. So here we need to go in the web.php. So if I scroll down here, routes, web.php, and here we need to create a route. And also to deal with, if you remember, we created a model, factory, migration, Cedar, but we did not create the controller. There is a need of a controller to manipulate data, to making changes in data before adding or getting data. So what I do here, I say PHP artisan make controller, and the controller we are going to create is employees controller. All right, so we create that. Now if I go here, we should have it in HTTP controllers, employees controller. Great. So we can use this controller in our route now. So I create a route, and this route going to be a get route. Now, because we here mentioned it is a get route, So the same way you need to say here, it is a get route. We have this, and what we want basically, we want employees controller class, and then I want to pass a method, and that's going to be get employee list. Alright, so this is going to be the method. Now something, so I'm going to break it down here like this, so that easy to read. Now we don't have this on top, so I'm going to remove the comment, and we need to include this as well. So here I say use, and we need to say app /http, and then controllers, and then employees controller. Now we have access to it, so it should work. Now if you want to give this controller a name, you simply pass here at the end name. So you can say any name. So I'm gonna give it a name of employee.list. So you can use this name in case you want to use name. Alright, so far so good. Yeah, it looks good to me. Now let's deal with this method. So we go back in controller. Here we need to create this method because we don't have it. So get employee list from database. So it's going to be public function, and this function I'm going to pass here a try statement. Now the try statement is basically to check if there is any error. We gonna see that error, or we gonna save that error in a log file. So here we say here exception $e, and you can log any error like this. So simply you pass $e, it will give you the complete detail in log. You need to pass on top, use log, and also use exception. These are two classes we're using, exception and log, so we're calling on top. Now here, let's get the data. So for getting the data, we need to call the model, as model deals with database. So we say employee, and if you remember the employee model we created, so the one here, now we have the value cells as well. So now I go back to controller. Here, what do we want to say? We want to say all, and then it's going to be $employees. All right, and we can return this. So return, and when you deal with the data in JS, as we are using React to show data, we better pass data in JSON prop format. So we can do this response, and then we say JSON. So we just need to pass this inside this variable, our function. All right, now it's going to be as we want. So let's see what happens. I go ahead and refresh the page, and we get the error. We get request failed status 500. We get a network list response, and we get the employee class. So you see, I did not include the employee class, and we got the error. So we need to include it. So employee class is in app /models, and then we have the employee. This should fix this error. So let's refresh, and this time is 200. So we have a list. You can see that we have the data is coming 100. All right, now it is coming in ascending order. If you want to change the order, what I do, I change the way it is getting. So I'm going to say here order by, I want to say order by ID, and we want in descending order, and then we say get. This should change the order. So if I go back to the browser and refresh, now you can see it's upside down. Alright, great. Now if I go to console log, we are getting data something like this. We get an object where we have data and then we have an array. So what we can do here is, if I go to table.js here, if I say response.data, then we will get access to array, because currently it is object then data. Now if I refresh, you can see we get straight away array of 100 employees. So what we do, we simply loop through. So we need to assign the value to the state, and to do that, what we do, we basically call this.set state, and to set state we call something like this. Inside it, what we want to do, we want to say the employees, and we want to set it to equal response.data. Put a space here. So this is going to set the data to there, and then what we can do, we can loop through. So here what I do, I'm going to create another component. So what we do here, so we have a table row here, so I can create a component here inside the employee list. I create a component table row, so it's going to be like this. And what we do, basically, we are going to I better take the class. I just copy this syntax here to table row, close this, and we have the, again, render method here, and this render method is going to have the return, and we need to return the JSX. So if I go back here, I just gonna get the row, and this table row will be like a complete row. So we just need to take this like here, go back here, paste it, because if you have everything, if some task from table row and then table cell, you will have a lot of functions here. So it's better to have separate. So we have it like this. Okay. So now we have it. So we need to create a constructor as well, and the constructor props, and then all right. Now with this table, we are calling it here. It should be table row, and the same way now we exported it. We need to export here table row. Now to use it in this file, we need to import it on top. So we need to call import table row, and it imported without an issue. Okay, now we need to loop through this employee's data, so let's do that. So here what we need to do, we need to first call table row. So this is the component, but this is going to be a single component, and we want to show the data that we are getting, so we need to loop through. So for that, we need to run here a function. Basically, I'm going to go and say something like this, and here I say this.state. So we need the access to state property because we have the value inside state. So this.state.employee. So we say this.state.employees. All right. Then we use a JavaScript method map, and it's gonna be like this dot map. So it's gonna map through each value. So I'm gonna say function, and here we say x for value and then for index. All right, and then we want to run this function. I don't need this. This goes to, yeah, it looks better. Now inside it I say return, and that's going to be the, now here is the thing, we need to pass this component inside, because each time this loop runs, it is going to pass a single value. So it's going to pass first time this value, second time this value, so each time the table row will update. So we pass it like here. So here we need to pass a key, because each employee should be unique. So it's going to be the index I, and then also we want to pass data, because that's what we are dealing with. We need to show the data of that employee, so it's going to be X. So we are passing here X data. So basically now we are passing a prop here, and now we need to catch this prop in our table row. So go there. So here what we need to do, we need to say how we can show the prop. So here we have ID 1, and now it was hard coded, but here we are getting it from the loop. So when we get is at a prop, we say this dot state, this dot props dot data. So I passed their data, so I'm calling here data dot ID. Now if I go back to the browser, we have ID there, so we are calling ID here. So it should work. Now the same way, I need to show the employee name. Copy this, pass here. It's gonna be employee underscore name. Again, go to the browser, we have employee underscore name. We're passing the same. So I'm gonna copy it again this time. And this time it's gonna be salary. Now make sure these name matches spellings, so otherwise you won't see the data here. And I leave this for now because we need to pass the buttons, and we will do that. So for now, this is it. And here we are passing React down. We don't need this. We can remove that. We need React and component only. So, all right, let's see if it works and we get data. So if I go back to the browser and refresh the page, we get an error. So it says this is undefined. And let's see. So if I go to table, okay, we are setting this state. So inside Axios, this loses, this is not accessible there. So we need to pass here this like this. So self is equal to this. And instead of this, now I'll pass here self. And it should fix it. So let's go back now and refresh. Okay, great. We have the data. You can see we have. All right, so let's add the buttons. So if you get the point why I create a separate component for table row and in table, now you will get the understanding why is that. Because if you see, we created a table row. Now we need buttons here, and each button going to have functions for update, for view. So we'll be putting those. If I don't create those components, all those functionality going to be in a single file, which is going to be a lot messier to manage. So now, as we are creating multiple components, it's going to be a lot easier for us to handle. So we have table row here called, then we have table row. Now here, I'm going to create a brand new component. So I'm going to call, first of all, create a component here. So it's going to be, let's call it table action, because it's buttons. So action buttons and .js. Now I go to table row, I copy everything from here and paste here. First thing first, we need to change this name. Table action. So the same we are exporting here. Now here in table row, we can include this. Import. So it's a table action buttons. It imports it automatically. We pass here this component. We need to have the ID of that particular employee. So we can pass that employee ID here as a prop. So let's do that. So I call it each row ID, and I say it is equal to, and all we need to do, we need to pass this prop data right there. All right, so now we be able to use it. So let's go here in our buttons area. Now here, what we need to do, we need to create the button. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to Bootstrap, and here I search for button group. So here we have button groups. So we have 3 buttons here, and that's what we need. So I'm going to copy this, go back here, and here the thing is we need only the buttons, so I paste that here only, and move this. We can remove this. Alright, now if I go back to our app, you can see that buttons are looking nice. And we have an header as well. So header is class. Okay, we use class somewhere. This saying use class name. So I'll go back there, and that's right here. Class name. It should be like this. Now I want to call this info, and I want to call the last one danger. This is going to be delete. This is going to be update, and this is going to be view. Alright, so that makes a lot of sense. So you'll see now it's better. So we have view, update, delete. Nice. So what we need now. Alright, so first thing first, we want to work with employee view. So I'm gonna expand it a bit, give it a bit space so we only work on this area. Now what we want to do, I want to go back to the Bootstrap, and here I will search for Modal, and here we have some sample models. So yeah, so we can use this. So to powering a model we need this. So what I'm thinking, we should create a separate model component for each, and as well as we need to pass. Let's do that. So we need a button. So we have a button here. On click of that, we are opening the model. You can see that it's the example here. So we need a button like this. So I simply copy this, go back to code editor. Our button is like this. So let's see what we need to add. So we have here, I move the comment, we have, let's see. Okay, we need to pass these two to power our model. So here, after type, class name, I'll break it again, paste these two. So we have, now noticeable thing is we have a database target, which is an ID of example model. So the model ID should match. So we need to create another component, and for that what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a folder. So I create here a folder with the name of Modal. Alright, models, and I create the first model that's going to be view modal.js. Alright, now this view model is going to have Let's take the code from here, table row, and paste in there. And change the name, view modal, and now for the HTML, JSX, we need to remove this, and here we need to call this. So copy all these from here straight away and paste it here. Now first thing first, we need to indent it a bit more. Alright, now so we have the example. So this ID should match with this button ID, and here we don't need the action button, so we remove that. Export is already there. Now we need to import this model here for sure, so let's do that. So import view model, and you can see it imported automatically. Now we can call this here. Now there is a trick, because we're calling it here, and if you remember, this always happening inside table action, which is inside table row, and if you remember, this is an inside loop. So we are doing it for 100 employees. So for that, if you want to show the detail of each employee on model separately, we need to pass some data here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So what we do basically in the action view, where we have this view model called, we need to pass here model, I call it model ID, and that's going to be equal to the ID we are receiving. So if you remember, in table row, we are passing each row ID that we can call here. So we say this dot props dot each row ID. All right, and also we need to pass the data to this model, so that for example, if I go back to the page, so when you click, we need the data name and salary, so it should display. So very refresh currently. Let's see what happens. Currently it says, okay, we need to correct this first. Class name. So Control D to select all, and then just replace by Control V. So this should be fine now. And then we have tab index where it is. So we can change it to capital I. Other than that, I think all should be fine now. And if I click here, we get a model. Alright, so what we can do basically, we can get data when we click here. So for this particular employee, we can fetch the data from database. Now what I do, if I go here in model, instead of putting code here, I go to table action buttons. Here the button, because on click going to be far here, I can say here on click, and what we want to do, we want to run a method, and we pass method like this. So we say that just run this dot, and I give this method a name, get employee details. All right, and as we have the access to the ID, we can pass the ID here, and now we can have this method. So let's create it. So here I say getting individual employee data, and then we call this. All right, and then as I want to make it arrow function, and as we are receiving the ID, if you remember, I pass it here so we can get it here, and here we use the Axios again, Axios, and this time it is going to be post request, and let's define a route. So I say here get individual employee details. Yeah, sounds about right. Now we need to pass here an ID, so I call here employee ID, and that's going to be equal to ID, the ID we are receiving on top. Once it is all done, we will receive response. Here we can pass arrow function as well, and I get here a response, and then here what we can say console.log response, and if you remember, there's going to be a data inside it, so response.data. Okay, this will fire on click of view. Now what we need to do, we need to work with this route, so let's deal with that. So I go to web.php, and here let's create another route. So it's going to be route post, and okay, we pass here this route. Then what do we need to do? We need to say which controller we want to use. In that case, I'm just gonna copy these and delete these. So go here, paste here, and give space. I change the function name to get employee details, and we can give it a name if you want to. So yeah, so we go here now and create this method. So here we can create it straight away. Public function, this method, it is going to receive a request, $request, as we are receiving the ID, so we need to use it. And here let's add a comment. So we pass here get individual employee details, and here inside again, as you guessed it, I'm going to use try catch again. Copy and paste here to save time. Here we're going to make the difference. So here, actually we still can use this. Here I'm going to say find or fail. So it is going to be get the data. If it doesn't get the data, it's going to fail. And to get the employee ID, if you go back to the buttons, so we are passing employee ID, so we need to get this employee ID here. Oh, sorry, we can close these header files and home pay and app as well, so that we have all the files open those are required. So yeah, employee controller, and here inside it, what we do, we simply say $request and then get, and we pass that employee ID like this. So this is going to get you the ID, and we are passing this ID here. If it gets the data, it is going to get the employee data instead of employees, and then you can return the employee data, something like that. Alright, looks fine to me. Let's see what happens. So if I go back here, refresh, and hit view. So we get an object, and if you see here Pearl, the same name in now Easter, let's hit this, we get the data for that particular employee. So yeah, it's working. Great. So as we are getting the data, let's go back to the button here. So we can now use this data. So what do we want to do? So if I go back to browser, we're getting an object. There is employee name, salary, ID. So I want to create two properties. So here what I do, I say this dot state, and it's going to be equal to object, and it's going to be current, because the person, the employee we clicked on, current employee name, and by default I want to set it to null, and then current employee salary, again by default null. Okay, now what we want to do, we need to update these values from this response, the one we are receiving here, so we can set employee name and salary to that. So for that, if you guessed it right, we will be using this dot set state again. So this dot set state, and here what I want to do, current employee name, and that's going to be equal to response dot data, because we console log response dot data. And after that, if I go back here, we have the employee underscore name, so we can simply pass that. So do that dot employee underscore name, and then we have the current employee salary, again response dot data dot salary. Okay, it's fine, it should work. Now as we are updating these values, so we are setting the state. So what we can do on click, when we are doing this, we can pass this to this model, because the ultimate goal is to, when we click here, to show this data here. So we need to pass this data to this model. So what we can do, we have this view model, and here I say let's call it employee data, and it's going to be equal to, again we need to pass here this dot state. All right, so it will have both the values, because we are passing this, so it will have both the values. And yeah, so on click it will update the values. So initially these values are null, then it's going to have some data, then we are passing, and then we can work in displaying these values. So let's see that. So I go to view model now, and as we are receiving values from here, so we have a prop to receive employee data, and we go back here and you can use that. So here, first thing first, we have a ID. So I want to give a unique ID for each model, and if you remember, we passed the model ID here as well. It's also a prop, so we can give that here. So how we define the ID? We simply say like this, then we say here this is a view model, all right, and with the ID of this dot props dot it's going to be dot, and then the prop we have model ID, so we pass that here. Alright, so each model will have a unique ID now, and yeah, that way we'll be able to work with that. Now we need to show the data, so what I do inside the model body here, I say name, and to display data I say use strong tag. And inside it I'm gonna pass the prop simply. So it's gonna be this dot props dot employee data because we are passing employee data, if you remember. So here it should be dot, and then at last we need employee. Actually, it's current employee because we are passing this state here. So this current employee we need to pass like this, and this goes away. All right, now I pass here HR, and then here we say salary. All right, and salary going to be again strong tag. What I do, I copy paste this and here, and here current employee salary, so we can pass that here. All right, now if I go back here and scroll down, the button here is also needs to be updated, because if you remember, we are here saying example ID, and we change the ID here to a dynamic ID from the model ID. So we need to pass here something like this. So I'm going to remove this. It's going to be ID, view model, right? And then we need to pass, because we're passing the ID, so we can use that ID here as well. So it's going to be dynamic as well. All right, go here and let's refresh. No errors so far. Click here. We have the person's information, salary, and we don't want save changes, so we can remove that from here. Employee details. Great, so it's working as expected. We have the view functionality working. So if I go and inspect any of these, we have a model with the unique ID you can see here, and we have the target with the unique dynamic ID as well. Okay, so working with update, what I'm going to do, go back to the table action buttons here, and now we can make a bit separation between update and delete. I take it up. Now here we can break it down like this. Okay, so what do we need? First thing first, I'm going to copy these two lines. So we need similar behavior here. This time it is not going to be view, it's going to be update. All right, so we will create a model which is going to be responsible for update. Then on click, we need the values, and that's going to be exactly the same, because these values we will be using in update model as well. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste here as well. So because when you click, you will, and pause one more time. So when you click, it should fetch the data for that particular employee to update. So yeah, it's going to work. Now we're going to go back here in view models. I'm going to create a new file, update model.js, and simply we can copy and paste everything from view model to update model and change. So here I say update model, and we need to export it at the bottom. Now here we are just displaying currently, so we will correct that. In here we need to import it, so we say here import update model. So now you can call this model just like this here. You can call it here update model, and then close it. I'm also going to pass these two values so that we have the employee ID, and or you can simply get the employee data, then we have the you can work with that too, but in our case we are using employee ID for each model, so I'm passing this too. Okay, great. Now we have the dynamic ID passing already, So if I go to update model here, I'm going to change it to update. And update should be lowercase, model should be capitalized. So yeah, update model. And the prop is exactly the same, so no problem about that. Now here in the model body we need to make changes. So here I'm going to create a form, and let's create it. And I'm going to pass the class name is Google Form. Now here I want to use a div with the class of form group, and we need inside it the input. So input now for input we need type of text. All right, then we need we also need the ID. So I'm going to pass an ID of employee name. Also we need value. So for value, what I want to do, so if we see we are just getting the prop. We can't just call prop here automatically, because when this page renders, it's going to render those models behind the scenes. So it is going to give us the error because we are getting those values on click. So we need to pass default values here. So what we can do, we can let's go up here, and I set two properties. So I say here this dot state equals an object. It's going to be employee name by default null, then employee salary again by default null. And what we can do, we can copy that. So here, all we need to do here is we set this dot state dot employee name. If that is present, then that is this, otherwise empty string. So that means otherwise. So if this value is present, this is going to show, otherwise this. Alright, great. Now what I want to do, I want to copy and paste this again, because we need the salary. So for employee salary, this is also going to be text, and this time it's going to be salary. Okay, looks good. And also we need a button. We have a button already here, all just on top of it. I'm going to create another button. So I'm going to copy this input from here, paste here, and this is going to be submit, and we call the class name to, let's call it BDN info. So it's going to be sky blue. Then we need the value, so pass here, let's remove this and value. It's going to be update. Alright, and then there's going to be a function. So because on click of this button we need to update the data, so here we're going to be on click, and this on click going to be this dot, let's create the function with the name of update employee and data. Alright, so yeah, that's what we need. So we don't have this function currently, so let's create it. Go above here and call this function, and I want to make it arrow function, so just convert it like this. and inside it we can do deal with the data. So currently we have the employee data here and here, but we are not updating the data. If you remember, we are passing data in on click. When we click this update button, it is going to fire get employee details, and then we are passing employee data. But here in update, we haven't used that employee data. We have this empty value. So what do we need to do? We need to update the data. So let's first get the values from the input. So what I do here, I create another method. It's going to be on change. This is going to fire. So what I want to do on change, we want to update the input. So I said this dot input employee name. So this is the method I'm going to call. And what exactly it is going to do, it is going to update the state. So let's call it here. Just like that, and it's an arrow function. So updating name state or employee name state. So this value. So here we are going to receive an event as it is going to be fired on change. Here we can say this dot set state, and here what we want to do, whatever we have in input on change, we want to set it to this employee name. So we can say here simply I copy this, paste here, and it's going to be event dot target dot value. Alright, so this is gonna update it. So basically, if you go on the log, you will see that in any event target value, whatever user types on click of the model or an input, that value will store here. Now we have two things. We have employee name and employee salary. So same thing we need to do in the employee salary as well. So I go here, paste right there. This time it's going to be update salary, copy this, and just here I say update employee salary data or state. Then here again it will receive an event as it is going to fire on change. I copy this to save time. Now here we say salary. So this will update the values. Now let's see if our model and everything works. If I go back here and refresh console log, we have a few errors. Class name, did you mean? I don't know where I did this. Let's correct that. So here it is. It's capital N. Again, capital N here. Rest looks good. Go back, refresh, update. We have two inputs here. So if I pass here something, so what we can do, we can check. So yeah, it's basically actually it's storing here. We are not doing anything with the state currently, so we are not seeing anything. But after all, it's working. So let's do this. Let's get the value from the data, because when I click here, it should be pre-filled, but it is not, because we are not dealing with the prop. The prop we can pass here. So we pass employee data, we are not using it. So let's do that. Now here, we need to care about a few things. There's going to be some value there. If there is value, then fine. Otherwise, it's going to be empty string, because when a page refresh, we are not clicking on this. So these values shouldn't be creating any problem. So what I'm going to do here, in this case, we need to use a function get derived state from props. So what exactly it does, it's going to get the values from the props and I'm going to put in there. So what I do, I'll show you here. So it's going to be a static method. It's going to be get derived state from props, as we need to update the data from props. So we need to use this. So props, we have access to here, and we have current underscore state. All right, so this is what we get. Now here, I'm going to create an object which is going to be similar to the state. So what, because we want to update the data, so we can do this. So we let employee and call it update, and they are going to be employee name by default null, and then employee salary again null. Alright, so we need to pass an if condition here. We're going to check if state data is null, then put the prop value in this state. So for that we simply say here if, and then going to be current state, we can access it like this, and dot employee name, and we say if not equal, alright, to the props dot employee data dot current employee name. So if this is not the case, then we need to update the value. So we want to update this object. So we say employee update dot employee name, and we want to put the value from prop, because obviously when you click the update button, we will be having some value when you click here, and that is going to be in prop. So we're going to be putting that value in this object. Alright, the same way I'm gonna put the condition again here. This is going to be employee salary and current employee salary. Same goes here. Just copy the paste here. And current employee salary. So it is going to update that, and because this object is updating, we can return it. And this is going to update the state. So employee update. So it's a spelling mistake here, so we need to be having this employee name update. So it should all be one, no errors. If I click here, you can see the object is filling the values. So if I go here, Easter and update, we have Easter on this value updating there. Great. All right, so if I want to change the value, I'll put here something. Now that is creating some issue here. You can see I'm gonna type here, it's just making things empty. So for that, what we need to do, we need to check here. Now this function fires whenever we set state. So whenever you are doing anything here, you're passing any values here, we are trying to set a state, then it is creating issue. So we need to set some condition here that checks that, okay, if we are updating this field, only get the data from the fields, do not get the data from prop, because here currently it is getting rid of prop, and we need to stop it in case we add some input. So what I do here in that case, we need to check here. So here I put command updating data from props below, and here I put a comment updating data from input, something like that too, so you get the understanding. So we say here if, and we say current state dot employee name. Okay, so first we are saying if this is present, that means we already have the data in current state, so that data is updated through this object and it's in current state. Then if current state dot employee data, all right, and then we need sorry, it's going to be current state employee name, and it is not equal to props, so whatever data we are getting. So employee name, I'm just going to copy this. I'll explain what exactly happening here. Then we simply say here return null. Okay, so what happened is we said, okay, if there is data already, so because when you refresh, when you click here, there is already name data present there. So we are saying if the data is present there, and that data, that what is present here inside this input, so if I go refresh, so we have data, this present data is not equal to props data. So how this will happen, because when I'm going to type anything here, so if I go here and let's go one more time, so if I type anything here, now it is changed to what we are getting from the prop, because from prop we are getting only the data without W. So this is what we are getting, but with whatever you add, it is going to be new data. So we are just checking here if current employee name is not equal to what we are getting in prop, and in that case we want to stop it. So we don't want to update using prop, because if you update using prop, so the data user added is not going to be processed. So for that here, I'm going to copy and paste this too. This is going to be employee, salary. And here, salary, in the same way, current employee salary goes here. All right, go back there, refresh, update. Now you can see that. Now this is something, it is working, but it's not disturbing others, because it is not going to here, because the data is not matching with prop, because prop was sending data till here, here, and we added this data, so it is different now. So it is not firing these statements, it is just firing till here. Alright, I see this, update, again, update, yeah. So every second time it is getting blank, you can see here, I click here, and then I click again, it goes away. So what we need to do for that? So here we are saying if the current state name is not equal to this, that means it is null, and we have some value in prop. So let's say prop is bringing this employee name, and current state is null, then it is not equal and it is updating. But when we update here, we have the value here, right? And now this current state has that name inside it. So next time when you click on it, it is having conflict, because we have the net value there, but it's not null. And we need to, in that case, what we want to do, we want to say that if this is this value not equal, or if there is value and it is equal. So if the value present, if I click this value, it is here. So next time it is not going to be null, it's going to be inside this variable, so here. So when I click here, it is not firing and not updating this, so that's causing issue. So I pause this here. also we need to pass here for updating the salary. Just copy this. Refresh, update, there is name, update again, there is name, update again, there is name. So you can see it stays there. So first time it is null and it is not equal to the name that is we are getting in prop. So it is updating this. Second time it has the name and the prop name is also has a name and both names are equal. So it is again updating it and showing it. So it's working. Yeah, that looks good. So now it's time we process the form. So let's create a method that is going to deal with the update. So we have a method already created here. Employee update data. So I say here updating employee data. All right. So here again, as usual, we're gonna use Axios .post method. We want to pass a URL, a route, so it's gonna be update /employee/data, and then I want to pass the data. So for the data, what we want to do, we want to pass here employee ID. So we want to have this dot. And we are getting the model ID, you remember, so we are passing this. So if I go back here in the action buttons, we are passing this, which is ultimately the employee ID and then the employee data, so we can use it. So we can say here, simply copy this and for the employee name we need to pass again something like this, props. Then we are using the, what are we using? We're using employee data here, so yeah. Just gonna copy this. Actually, what we can do, we can get it from state as we are updating the state, so that is going to be, so I can call here this dot state dot employee name, and at last employee salary, which is going to be this dot, again we're going to access through state, and then going to be employee salary. Alright, now when we get this, we want to catch the response. We get then. Here I pass our function, which is getting the response. And here, what we can do, we can simply, because we are updating it, and at this point, what I want to do, I want to simply say location and location dot reload. So it will refresh the page, and I think we don't need this response in that case. So yeah, so we don't have this route. Let's work with this. I go back here to the web.php, and there we create this route. So here it's gonna be route and post route. This is the route, comma, and I copy this from here. All right. Now here we say update employee data. We are not using name anywhere, so I'm just going to remove the name. So we just are updating. So let's go to the controller, and here let's add this method. So public function method is here, say updating employee data. All right, looks good. Now let's deal with the update again. I'm gonna copy paste try catch here. So we log the error, and here for the update, we need to use request because we are receiving data here. So we're gonna say request and $request. All right, you can see what data you're getting simply by dd $request, and there should be single dollar and then dash here, all basically, and it's gonna die dump all the data. So let's see. So refresh, I say update, I pass here another D, and I hit update. We go to here, response, and you can see that we have some data showing up there. We have employee ID, employee name, salary, all the data is coming. That's great. So we need to deal with this data now. So what I do is simply, I'm gonna create 3 variables. $employee name, or what I do is simply copy this 3 times. This becomes ID, that is a name, and this becomes salary. All right, now we need to get the data. So I say $request get. We need to pass the names that we have here. So employee ID, we pass here. The same way we need to remove these. Okay, so it should match here. So employee name and employee salary. So we should be able to get the data. Now here we call the model employee, and we say where. Here we say ID is equal to this ID. So where this employee, the current employee we are updating, is present, update the data, and we pass an array. We say here employee underscore name, which is going to be equal to that, and then employee underscore salary, and we want to set it to this. So employee name going to be this variable, and then employee salary going to be this variable. As it is array, we need to pass commas here. So it should be fine, and if all works fine, we can return some response, and if you want to return response in JSON, you can you can use JSON method. I can even pass the array here, and we can even pass the data in array similar to this if you want to pass the data like that. So we remove this too. Okay, so far so good. Now I need to add a semicolon here. Instead of reloading, let's see what we're getting. So here's a response, and I'm gonna console log this response. All right, now refresh, update. I remove empty from here. Update data. Console log. We have empty data here. Okay, so the field names are wrong here. Sorry about that. If I go to database, we have employee underscore name, salary. Here I have employee underscore name, salary, and employee underscore salary. So it shouldn't be like this. All right, so it should be like this. This is the okay. Variable was wrong, so it should be $salary, $employee name. Okay, it's been a long video now, so I'm getting a bit lazy maybe. So this is something we need to do. Now here, refresh, go back here, removing the MD, update. This time we get 200 and data here as well. So for a refresh page, yeah, it removes the MD. So now what we can do, now we successfully updated. So we need to show the status, some kind of notification. So I'm going to use a package, and it's Toastify, React Toastify. So I'm gonna install this here in our project, and the link is in the description. You can check from there. Just install this. Now what we need to do, we need to go back to our update model. So let's go there. And here, when we have the console.log, I'm gonna remove the response, and I'm gonna say here toast. Now to see this message for a while, and then we refresh the page. So here as is set, timeout. And I put a timeout here and put the reload. Now to see the this notification, we need to add a component by this package. So for the package, we have it here, and we need to call the component like this. So let's do that. So in our update model, we need to call a component. So I'm going to copy these 2 lines, go back there, and I'm going to paste these lines here. So we have toast, I'm just going to replace it like this. Actually, we don't need container in here. That container we need in the main file. So if I go to the main file, which is table, because we want to show it on top of table, so I will add here. I'll remove this react DOM from here as well and paste this here. Alright, so we have this, and now when we have it here, we can call it inside this. So where we have our table, a row here, container, let's add it here. Okay, now let's see if it works. So if I go back here, refresh, and update, let's put MD back to this employee. We get the message there, and after that it refreshes. It works perfect. So if we're working with delete, we go to table actions where we have buttons. So here is our delete button, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this again, and I'm going to paste this again. So we have this time this is going to be class danger. We have model. I'm going to create another model with the name of delete model. So it's going to be, I'm going to give the user an alert like, okay, are you sure you want to delete it? So it's going to be delete. We can remove this, and we can import our component. So here in models, I create another model delete model.js. Alright, great. Now what are we going to do? What are we going to have in it? So we go to, let's go, because we have the view, which is a simple one. So I'm going to copy everything from here, paste here. Now I'm going to change this name to delete model, and then we're going to export it. And here we simply want to say, are you sure you want to delete this employee data? That title will be there. So we have the one button here, and we will create another button here in a moment. Now what I do, we need to import this delete model in our buttons. So let's go on top, import delete model from models, go down there, and just like we did before for update view, I'm gonna pass this here. And I want to pass both the values just the same way. So I'm gonna copy this and paste here. Right. Now here, what do we want to do? We want to create our function on a button click. So this is the close button, or what I do basically. Yeah, leave this button as it is. Copy this. And paste here another button, and this is going to be yes, so user is ready to delete, and this is secondary, this is going to be danger, and this is going to be model dismiss, and on click, what I do, I say here on click, we're on a function, so we're on a function like this in React, so that it doesn't fire automatically, it only fires when we want it to fire. So this is going to be this dot delete employee data, and here we want to pass a prop, so we will pass this model ID simply. Now also we can change this name here, delete model, so go back to buttons. Yes, delete model already here, so it should be the same here. Great. So we pass this now on click. Now we need to have this function, so let's add this. So go up, and here just below the constructor we can say delete function for employee data, and here it's again going to be arrow function, so I'm going to say like this, and then what we want to do, we want to use Axios dot delete, and here I want to pass a URL. It's going to be delete, then employee, then data, and I want to pass the ID, so we can get the ID here. So I can say employee instead of ID, I just call it like that, because ultimately, let me make it bigger, we are passing the ID here, so whatever ID you're passing, you can call whatever you want, so we're passing that. So pass it like this. So if you pass ID, you need to pass slash here. Alright, and then we say here then, and here we need to pass another arrow function, and here as it's going to delete, so we can say toast dot error, so that is going to be a red alert. Employee deleted successfully, and again refresh the page, so set timeout. Alright, so here it's gonna be 250, 2.5 seconds. Then after that, location dot, it's a reload, and it should work. Now we don't have this route, so I'll work with this route now. Go to web.php. Here we are going to create a route, and I want to show you how we can work with route model binding in this one, because that's a concept in Laravel and it's an important one. So we have here so far, let's see, employee. So you can see that if I go to delete, so we are passing delete employee data and then the ID of the employee.
here we are saying delete employee data and employee ID, passing like this. Then we can say here comma, and I'm gonna copy and paste this just like that here. Alright, now what we want to do, we want to use a method destroy, okay, and go to the class here, and here we say deleting employee. So here is a public function destroy. Alright, and here because we have the employee ID passed here, and so we can use the employee class here. Alright, and then it's going to be $employee like this, and we don't need to say like find or where ID or find or fail, nothing like that. If we are passing it like this, it is quite simple to delete in that case. All we need to say $employee delete, and it will do it. So what I do, I copy and paste try catch here to be at safe side, and here all we need to do is get this $employee and pass delete method, and Laravel will figure out this ID and automatically going to delete. Alright, so all is set. We have our route set, delete method is set, and we are using delete method this time to be very precise on this one. For update you can use put, for save you can use post, for update you can use post as well as we use post here. So that's what we do. So here we have it. Let's check if it works. So we go back to the browser, refresh. I want to delete this one, so I say delete. Yes, employee deleted successfully. Refresh, and 100 employees gone. It's not there. So successfully we have the functionality at place now. It's working perfectly. Alright guys, now for creating an employee we need to add employee create button. I'm going to add it on top of this table. So what I do basically, I'm going to go into the files there. In models we're going to create another model. It's going to be create model.js. Alright, now this model will have let's get the data from view and close it. Delete, we don't need anymore. Table row, we don't need anymore. So we need all these files, that's it. And here what we have, so it's gonna be model create. We don't have to pass any dynamic ID, we can remove that, and it's going to be create model, or let's call it model create. Alright, and here in the input, to save time, what I can do, I can go simply in update model, and we can copy things we need from here to there. So here if I go, we have the form already created, so we can copy this, go back in there and paste in there. So for create we don't need any prop, as it's going to be the new values, so we are not passing any value in this case. It's going to be they're going to be a placeholder, and we want to pass the placeholder like name here, so user knows where to enter the name. And on change employee name, yes, we will be doing this, and the value again here an updated placeholder, and here in this placeholder is going to be salary here. So this, if you remember, input name, input salary, we are just setting the values. So we are updating the state accordingly. So if I go back here, we see here we have these methods here. So we are just setting the state to the entered value. So we can use that. So we can copy this state here on top. and then I go here and I copy these two methods and I paste these methods here. Now here it's going to be creating, and same goes here. So we have employee name, employee salary as an empty state by default. Then on change, these two methods are firing. These methods are updating these two state values. So state is updating, basically, nothing fancy. So we have here one button which is dealing with the closing of the model. So here we need to have another button which is going to fire for storing the data. So I'm gonna copy paste the input here, call it button, and ID we can skip it, we don't need any ID here. Placeholder, we need value instead. We will see here save, because we are saving an employee. And on change, instead on change we need on click. And function we need to create, let's call this function store employee data. So this is going to be the method. We don't have this method, so let's add this method. So here, storing employee data. Alright, so here we pass, it's gonna be arrow function again. Alright, now here I use Axios.post, and here we need to pass to store, let's call employee data. Okay, and the data we need to pass as we are updating the state, you can see, so we can pass data from state. So here I simply pass here employee name, that's going to be this dot state dot employee name. Alright, the same way employee salary, this dot state dot employee salary. So yeah, now here we need to get a response, so with then here all we want to do, want to give it alert. So it's here toast dot success, and the message going to be employee saved successfully. Alright, then again set timeout. In further projects we'll see what best we can do and how make this application more advanced or something like this more advanced. For now I'm just gonna do the location dot reload to refresh the page. Now we don't have this route, so work with that. So go here. Now we need to create a route. So here, let's create a route. So it's a route, and this is going to be post as we are storing data. And then what do we want to do? We want to remove this. I'm gonna copy this from here. And the method we're going to call is store method. So I go to employee controller, and here we say storing new employee. Alright, public function store. As we are receiving the data, I will use here again, so I'm going to use here request $request. I copy the try catch from here so we can save time here. Now we can work with the store. So here I remove this. And to get the data, I see here employee name going to be equal to $request, and then get, and the value we are getting. So here we are passing employee name, because if spellings aren't right, sometimes it can create problems. So make sure you use correct spellings. So here I go to copy paste and paste here. Alright, we have both values. So here I say employee, and here we're going to use a create method, which takes the array just like update method. So we can pass array just like this. So I'm going to pass array like that. So employee name and employee salary, yeah, both variables should be the same, otherwise we will face issue. So yeah, now I'm gonna response back again the same. So just, and yeah, we can see, yeah, great. So it should be working now. So if I go to create here, all is set. So let's see, refresh. Okay, so we are almost done, but not there yet. If I go to the JSX of ours, we have the model, but we don't have a button, and we haven't included this create model anywhere. So first of all, let's add a button. So I'm gonna create here a div, and adding div here will give us an error because we should have a single element, it's a single tag. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass this, and you can pass it empty, and at the end you can pass it like this. So now we can have multiple divs inside it. So the top div is going to be the div where we want to have the button. So I say class name, let's call it row, I say text right, margin bottom 3, padding bottom 3, and inside it we want a button. So I say here button, and we need to have a class of this button too. So let's do that. So it's going to be class name. Yeah, I'm going to give it a button bdn info for sky blue color, text right, cool 3, and offset MD9 so that it goes to the right of the screen, it doesn't look in the middle. And here also we want so that we can open the model we have here. This model we want to open on this button's click. So we say here data, and that's going to be toggle, which is going to be model. And then we're going to have the data target, which is going to be equal to the ID. So here are going to be ID, model create. And yeah, that's it. And for the text, I say here add new employee. Now we need to include this into the main table. So let's go to table here, and I include here using import create modal. Now create model from, and it's a model, and then create model. It should be fine. Now we need to call it. So I want to call it here. In the ID, I remove this. Another thing, we need to change the name. We haven't changed it, so create and export it as create. So So where we imported it as create model, so it should be. And yeah, let's refresh. And so models working fine, but there's some issue with the Bootstrap that is not working on the create model, as we added the create model in main screen. So if I go back to the browser, refresh, when I hit it, it's not working. However, it's working here. So to fix it, what we can go into the layout file, which is basically mainly responsible file. If we go here, and mainly we have this app.blade powering this app. So we can add there in the where the body tags are ending here, we can add two, one the jQuery as well as the Bootstrap min.js, these two files. Now if I go back and refresh the page and add this, so we have the model working just fine. So here I'm gonna add a class for the class name. I'm just gonna bdn info, so it looks a bit better. So go here, refresh, and yeah, it's better now. So if I want to save and in the inputs we can have some on the class as well. So here, if I go here, we can say class name and a form control. I want this on every input, so I'm gonna paste here. It will make it look a bit better. So if I refresh now, go here, and you can see it's a bit better. Now we can have here margin bottom 3. Let's see how it looks. So copy these, paste here, and refresh. Yeah, it's better actually. So I remove the padding, but margin should be there. So I'm gonna copy this, and wherever we have the input, we want to add this. So in create, in update, we also have it. So here we want to add it, and yeah, mainly here. So refresh. So create looks good, and update also looks good now. Yeah, much better. So let's see if create works. If I add here Roger and some number as a salary and save, we get employee saved successfully, and we get the Roger added, and that's great. So create is working as expected. We have view working, update is also working. So if I update the username, and yeah, it updates. If you want to delete it, it deletes. So yeah, it's working. We will see if we can work with the more on this project to make it more advanced and pass the values to the parent element using props, because currently we need to refresh the page. So we'll see about that, but for now this is it, and you can download the code from the description. And I hope you like this video. Thank you for watching, and do share your feedback. Thank you for watching. Bye.